All right, guys, I think we should kick it off and we can just have other people join when they can. So thanks everybody for joining. We really appreciate it. This is how to hit a home run with Salesforce and marketing automation. Next slide. Awesome. And here's our introduction. So this is our batting order, so to speak. So my name is Christy Hawes, and I'm a sales leader within our financial services vertical. You'll also be hearing from Gil Lantini from IMG, who will walk us through what is marketing automation and ways to use marketing to create sales alignment. And finally, Ryan Maddox, who is our marketing executive, will walk us through a demo of our solution. The next slide. So again, here's a snapshot of the agenda that I just discussed. But if anybody has any questions, then please feel free to add them into the chat and we will answer them as we go. And with that, I will hand it over to Gil to start the presentation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Christy.
Yep.
Thank you everybody for joining today. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us on our marketing automation demonstration and discussion around how to leverage marketing automation tools. Had a little fun with the baseball theme today. It is baseball season just starting. It's great to see some people in stands and get things back to normal. So I'm representing the Yankees today as a lifelong Yankee fan. Mr. Maddox is representing his St. Louis Cardinals. So we won't talk about which teams are better, but we are representing our teams today. And so thanks again for being here. Again, any questions as we're going through the conversation, please put them in chat. We do have Jake monitoring the chat as well, so he'll pause us and ask any relevant questions as we're having our conversation. So without further ado, let's get started. So really, and these are not my words, crap and lazy, but studies have shown that salespeople feel like the leads they receive from marketing sometimes tend to be less than ideal. Some studies have shown that they use the word that the leads are crap, or some more colorful words, I'm sure. And on the other side, a lot of times marketers feel that sales isn't following up or doing the appropriate things that they should with the leads that are being generated. So they've used the word lazy. Now, I'm sure no one on the call today has issues with their sales and marketing teams, really having this battle of is it a lead problem or is it a quality problem or is it a sales problem? But for those that have had this situation, there is a struggle at times between sales and marketing. And again, there's sometimes the finger pointing, across the aisle. In other scenarios, it's more of who's taking the credit. Marketing says, well, we're generating, all these great leads, and that's why revenue's up, or, sales might be feeling like they're the ones closing all the leads. The reality is that without proper sales and marketing alignment, we're not able to achieve our revenue goals. So today's conversation is really around how to align sales and marketing teams and really just make sure that everybody is part of the process, everyone's part of the solution, and ultimately everyone's happy with the results they're getting. So this alignment is really, really important, and it's something that I'll touch upon throughout my portion of this webinar today. The term marketing automation, which again is something that we'll talk more about, and Ryan will show how that works from a technology standpoint in a bit. Marketing automation is the idea of actually taking data from a CRM or from some data source, and then automating outreach based on what we know about our prospects. So again, this is a topic we're going to touch more upon, but the idea of marketing automation is putting some of our marketing on autopilot, but still leaving enough personalization so that the recipients and our prospects don't really realize it's on autopilot. It looks very personal and more of that one-to-one conversation. So when we talk about lead generation, there's two scenarios. There's a scenario where a business has enough leads already in their system and they're just working the leads that they have, right? So they're not necessarily generating new leads. They just need a better way to actually work the leads that are in their database or in their pipeline. The other scenario is that there aren't enough leads and we really need to take on this initiative of inbound marketing. So what we'll talk about here is really what that process looks like for those of us that don't have leads in our pipeline and need to generate leads. So the idea of inbound marketing really is built around the premise of creating thought leadership, creating content that is really strong and makes people come to you, right? So inbound marketing, just as the term sounds, it's creating that inbound influx of leads. So people are finding you or attracted to your business because of the content that you're putting together. And ultimately, those are what we call top of funnel leads. So they really start at the top of the funnel, where we then filter them down through the pipeline as they become more qualified. So again, lead generation with inbound marketing it starts with content. So what types of content are we talking about? So first, we look at website content. So Google, over the past several years, has really put an emphasis on creating strong content on your website that drives SEO, search engine optimization. So somebody goes in, they look for a Salesforce implementation partner, and we want Integrated Media Group to show up because we want someone looking for the services to find us. That's SEO. The way to improve your SEO or to show up based on those keywords is to create content. And typically we look at things like blogs and white papers. Blogs can be short. We look at 350 words for a blog, so nothing that's too time consuming to write. White papers are a little more involved and more technical, but both blogs and white papers will help improve your SEO and ultimately give people a reason to find you online and visit your site. From there, we look at capitalizing on social. So, how do we take the content we have in addition to other things going on within our business and create a social campaign that again drives awareness and drives inbound marketing? So looking at, if we're B2B, we're looking at LinkedIn. If we're B2B or B2C, we're looking at potentially Facebook or Instagram. There's also the use of Twitter, and then some newer social platforms for, younger audience, more B2C, TikTok. For more B2B audience, there's Clubhouse. So ultimately having a strong social strategy is important. And what I find is it's good for brand. So it doesn't always drive leads, but it creates brand presence so that as we start to do more with the other portions of marketing and the other channels, there's already some brand presence and brand awareness there. So from social, we talk about, just like today, webinars, events, video, in-person events, obviously. There's been, a decrease over the past year, if not, a complete halt for most in-person events. We're starting to see some of that come back in small capacity, but really a lot of people have moved to these online events, online format. So putting together a webinar, so just like today's webinar, we've been doing one every few months, and really it's about picking a topic, picking an audience, promoting the event. So we're using email and social, and then hosting that webinar or event. So we use Eventbrite as it's listed here for registration. We're using Zoom for the actual delivery of content as well as the recording. And then after this, we'll post it to a YouTube channel and we'll share it with the team, for example. So really creating events to actually draw people in that might be interested in your business, and then providing some education and some value back. And the last few things here, enabling sales to create pipelines. So that the idea of one-to-one or one-to-many campaigns. So as we think through, leads are coming in, do we want to create campaigns where there's just one-to-one, where it's, me emailing a person, which is more of a sales cadence or a sales outreach? Or do we want those one-to-many campaigns where we're actually reaching many people through one channel, where the content's a little more generic, but it's still targeted enough to feel like it's personal, which we'll talk more about. And then ultimately, how are we measuring results? So what types of reporting do we have? So are we running paid ads? Do we have Google Analytics installed? Do we have a marketing automation engine or a CRM that's giving us the data we need? So as we're starting to generate more of these leads or create content, we need to know, are we increasing web traffic? Are we increasing inbound leads? Is sales actually handling these leads, and what do the opportunities look like coming out of them? So again, the idea with inbound marketing is to create pipeline to allow sales to actually manage those leads and ultimately give us reporting so we can see what's working and what's not. So one of the things that we'll touch on, and again, Ryan will get more into this, but the idea of scoring and grading is really important, both from a marketing automation standpoint, but even more importantly, from a sales and marketing alignment standpoint. So if we think of the idea of scoring, right, that's how interested someone is in your business. So we look at things like they're opening emails, they're accessing files, they're visiting the website, they're filling out forms. They're really taking action with the marketing content we're putting out. So if we go back to the concept of inbound marketing, as we put that content out, if we have a marketing automation engine in place, we can score all those activities. And essentially, as we're scoring them, we can get a sense of if they're interested in our business just based on the fact that they're showing engagement. But more importantly, what are they interested in? What types of content are resonating? And then ultimately, does this become a sales qualified lead or a marketing qualified lead based on the scoring criteria? So again, things like page views, form submissions, email clicks, downloads, these are all the types of activities we can score. Even things like social, we can score as well. So what we look at next then is, okay, we have a score, so we know someone has interest in us or doesn't have interest. That's what marketing is generating. On the sales side, there's a grade, right? So what sales is saying is, is this person an A, B, C, D, F, right? How do we grade them based on the criteria of what we're looking for as salespeople? So I want someone with a C-suite, C-suite executive, right? I want someone with the right title in the right industry at the right company size. So I'm going to grade Emily a B plus because in this scenario, she has the right title, she's in the right industry. Maybe the company size is a little smaller than I'd like, but it's in line with what I'm looking for. So I'm going to give Emily a B plus, versus Sarah, who has a D minus here. Maybe her title was an intern. Maybe she was somebody in HR and we don't, HR is not who buys our service, for example. Maybe the industry was wrong or the company size wasn't right, or geographically, Sarah's not based where we want her to be. So again, using technology, using Salesforce tools, we can actually grade individuals. So ultimately, again, as we kind of go back to the idea of alignment, if marketing is showing that there's a high value of a prospect and sales is saying that the grade of that prospect is what they're looking for, now we're creating the proper alignment between sales and marketing. Again, the score is high enough to show they're engaged. The grade is high enough to know that they're, of interest to us from a sales perspective. And now we have a much more successful handoff because both sides know what we're looking for. So again, we'll touch upon scoring and grading a little more when Ryan goes through the demo, but definitely a really strong part of how we're managing this idea of sales and marketing alignment. So the idea of lead nurturing. So assuming we have successful inbound marketing initiatives, we're running social campaigns, we're running paid campaigns, we're putting some great content on our website and people are starting to connect with it. So we're collecting all this data and this information. So we're at a point now where we feel like, we have leads, we have, dozens or hundreds or potentially thousands of people in our database, in our CRM that we really want to start reaching out to. So my favorite way is still with email. I think that there's been conversations in the industry around what channels work and why. And, there's conversations around texting being a strong platform. There's conversations around, paid channels working really well. What we do know is that phone calls other than the car warranty calls we get all the time now. A lot of people, if they're calling us to sell us something, we're not really interested or we're not listening, right? So the idea is that, yes, phone calls are still an important part of the sales outreach. They always will be, but we need multiple ways to get in front of our audience. So the idea of lead nurturing is essentially taking our prospects through a journey or through a funnel or, really a sequence of messages, and maybe we're mixing in social content and other channels, but ultimately a lead nurture campaign or a drip sequence is where we start with an audience, we have a series of emails that we're sharing, and then there's some type of outcome we're looking for within that lead nurture or again, that drip campaign. So there are four main things we look at when we're planning these campaigns. So the first is the audience, which I just touched on. The audience is, what segment of our database should get this communication. In some cases, it could be everybody who's a prospect. In other cases, it could be prospects that have not engaged previously, prospects who are new within the last 90 days, prospects that sales had talked to in the past, but we never closed the deal. So the idea of segmentation is really important. We want to build a specific audience for our campaign. The more specific we go, the more narrow we go, the better results tend to be. So next we look at the goal. So what is the goal of our program? Are we, trying to generate new leads for sales? Are we trying to, in this scenario, we sent out emails to generate some webinar interest, so people registering for an event. Do we want someone to schedule a meeting? Do we want them to purchase something online or sign up for, something, some, consultation or some other engagement? So we need to understand the goal, because the content of what we're pushing out will relate to the goal. So it is important to set that goal going in. And then what is the content, right? So the idea of, is it just email content? Are we just sending out a series of 3, 4, 5 emails? Or are we going to take a blog post, take a sample of that and put it in the email and then link to it? Are we having people download white papers? Are we going to put an infographic in our emails to make them look more visual? Are we sending them to a landing page? So we really need to take an inventory of all the content needed for our campaign. And then when should the program start and when should it end? So, there's always a starting point, and maybe everybody starts at the same time, or maybe we have a campaign that's ongoing that people enter at different times based on them meeting the criteria of our audience. And then how long does that campaign run for? So do we have a specific date that it ends? Like if it's for an event like today, any outreach would have to end on a certain date, because obviously the event is on a certain date. However, for campaigns that don't have a specific end date, they could run, over a 4 or 6 week period, and it doesn't matter when they start and when they end, because the content would always be timely. So again, from a planning perspective, we're looking at audience, who's getting communication, goal, what are we trying to accomplish, the content, what are the assets that are needed for the campaign, and then what does the timeline look like of the campaign. So again, I touched upon the assets of a campaign, and this tends to be the most time-consuming piece. And once you have these assets together, it really helps to streamline and speed up the process. So first, we talked about the audience, right? We have 2 types of lists we can build when we send emails. We have a static list, which is me maybe importing some data from a trade show or taking a defined segment of my CRM and importing them into the email tool. Or a dynamic list, which is a list based on rules. So a list where I want everybody in a specific industry. So I want all wealth managers with a C-suite title. Maybe it's, could be a director title, could be a vice president title. And I want them to be in the, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey area, for example. So I'm picking 3 states, I'm picking titles, I'm picking industries. And then anytime someone meets that criteria, they enter the list dynamically. So I set it up once, and then as people are adding new prospects or new prospects are coming in, they're dynamically getting added to this list. So again, having a list is really one of the starting points, because a lot of what we're building after that is going to be geared towards the audience that's in our dynamic or static list. As far as suppression lists, what that would be is that's a list of people that we don't want to get the email. So as an example, we're sending out an email to prospects. So I want to have a suppression list of all my clients. So this way I know there's no way that a client may accidentally get on this list as long as I've added them to a suppression list. Or another example is you're sending out emails, but someone doesn't want to receive the rest of the emails. Maybe they replied and they're interested. If you don't suppress them from your campaign, they're going to get another sales outreach when they're already engaged with you. So that obviously sends the wrong message. That lets people know that we're not listening to them. So it is important to make sure that if someone does reply, we suppress them from the campaign as well. So we talked about recipient and suppression lists. Then we're going to look at the emails. So email templates. Are we creating visual email templates? Are we creating more text-based and personal looking email templates? We want to come up with a combination of different designs, again, some more complex and some more straightforward, that really speak to the message and the goal of our campaign. So building out those templates and then the content that's in those emails. And we talk about landing pages and forms. Where are we sending people? So are we just going to send them to our website, or do we have a specific page that we're going to design that has a call to action? So sending them to a specific page where they can sign up for a free consultation, request more information, download a white paper, request pricing, and then that campaign, that page is specific to the campaign that we're running. So again, you'd have this one-to-one relationship. One campaign has one specific page that we're sending people to, versus just pushing them to the website and hoping that they find the contact page. And then the last asset here is really just the workflow of sequenced emails. So what's the first email in sequence? How many days are we waiting before the second email? Are we branching off into a yes or no path? They open, they go down one path. They don't open, they go down a different path. And again, Ryan will get more into this in a bit. But the idea is we can build out these, either simple or sophisticated workflows that change content based on the interaction that our prospects are having. So I touched upon the different types of emails, and there essentially are two types of emails that we look at. One is your what we call batch and blast, right? You just build one generic email and you batch up your list and you blast it out to everybody. So that's called your batch and blast email. That would be more synonymous with like your MailChimp, Constant Contact, Active Campaign, Campaign Monitor type emails. Anything you're going to send from a traditional email platform would really fall into that batch and blast category. So the email on the left has a nice visual impact, but it doesn't speak specifically to the person that it's being sent to. So it looks great, it builds brand, it creates web activity, but it doesn't look personal, obviously. Even if I send it from me, it still doesn't look like a personal email. On the right-hand side, we have more of a one-to-one looking email. This is also sent from Salesforce Pardot, which again, Ryan will get more into the specifics, but ultimately that email on the right is also sent using an email platform. So it looks just like a one-to-one email. It has my signature, it's text-based, it merges in the first name. So if I send this to somebody, they're not going to really recognize this as an email that's much different than if I just sent it out of my Gmail or my Outlook. But what it allows me to do is, automate the sending of these emails while still have this very personal look. Again, making the recipient think that I just emailed them one-to-one. So the email on the left gets more click-throughs and more brand presence and more web activity, whereas the email on the right tends to get much higher response rate because it does look more natural. So I'm going to give a few examples of campaigns that we've seen a lot of success with. The first one's called the bench warmers. So these are people that, the prospects are sitting on the bench. There's no interaction. They might be ready to go. They're ready to join the game. And we don't know because we're not reaching out to them. So in this case, if we were to build a dynamic list, it would be any leads without an assigned rep, right? So nobody on the team has been assigned to them. They're just sitting in our database. Or maybe the person that's assigned to them is no longer with the organization, or they're assigned to some type of lead queue. So they're unassigned. They don't have somebody actively working them, which again is a field that we can build a list off of. Or prospects that have had no interaction with their sales rep at all. So they may have an assigned sales rep, but they don't really know who it is because the sales rep has never actually connected with them. So again, they're sitting there, they're on the bench, they're ready to go, they need our service, but we're not actually reaching them. So the goal of this campaign would be to generate replies, inbound phone calls, website form submissions. So we're trying to generate response of some sort. We don't just want them to, read a blog or go to the website. We're trying to generate a direct response. And then based on that response, we're going to assign it to somebody on the sales team or notify their assigned rep. But the idea here is, again, this is the sales and marketing alignment piece. We're building an audience that we know the sales team would like to speak with. And based on activity, based on score, based on triggers, we're then notifying the sales team through task automation and through other alerts that this person should now be followed up with. So the content in a campaign like this would have a few things. We can do a click to call, right? So we can actually have a phone number embedded in our emails so that if you click that phone number, it actually would dial directly out of either, mobile, which 50 to 60% of emails are opened on mobile. So that would just call right from their mobile device. Or if there's a dialer on their laptop, which a lot of people have now because we're, on a lot of these virtual calls all day. So click to call, and we can measure that engagement, how many people actually click to call. Landing page, right? We're going to send people to a landing page with specific content around our campaign and then collect data. So now with the content, we're actually going to have a landing page, again, that looks really nice and it's branded to our website. But the idea of it is that it's going to capture information from somebody to let us know that they're interested. And then the email mix, what I like to see is, one-to-one and HTML kind of part of the same campaign. So maybe the first 2 emails in this example are personal, and then the third email is visual. The reason behind that is because the first 2 emails, someone that's not really familiar with our brand, we need those first 2 emails to really help make a connection and a personal connection, so they'll get through. And then by the time we get to that third email, the first 2 emails would have gotten through. We're not getting flagged as spam or recognized as a spammer because we're sending these personal emails, which is great. So now that third email has a much more likely chance of getting through, that has more of a visual appeal and has some brand elements to it. So it supports the previous 2 emails, and then typically we go back to the personal emails from there. So I like to mix a branded email in the middle, preceding and following with more personal emails. So these are our bench warmers. And then the next one, the sacrifice fly. We don't always call them this. We only call them this today, but the sacrifice fly. So these are people that had no activity in the last 6 months. So we're putting a time frame on it, right? So these are leads that sales is assigned to and aligned with, but in the last 6 months, and maybe it's 3 months, the time frame is really based on your sales cycle. But what we're trying to do is just nudge them a little bit closer, right? So sacrifice fly, bring them a little bit closer to home. So the idea here is that, again, we're taking prospects with no activity. We just want activity at this point. So we want to take these inactive leads and we want to just generate something to show that there's some level of interest, and then ultimately pass that off to sales or continue to nurture based on what we're finding. So the goal here is just to pass sales ready leads to the sales team based on interaction. So we're not saying they have to reply. We're not saying they have to fill out a form. We just want to know there's a pulse there, that they're engaging on some level. But if they don't respond, if they don't fill out a form, that's okay. We just want to let sales know, yes, you should continue to pursue this person because they are showing some level of digital interest, but they just haven't reached out yet. And what this allows us to do in the same time is not only are we really feeding sales with leads that they have not followed up with or that haven't shown any interest or interaction, but we're able to clean up inactive leads. So this actually serves 2 purposes. I'm a huge fan of taking leads that are not active at all, that sales has no luck with, that marketing has no luck with, and just purge them. Because ultimately, inactive leads that are not engaging with digital content actually make it harder to get content to people that are interacting with our content. So the more inactive prospects in our email database, the lower our open rates will be to everybody, because the email providers are basically saying that, Integrated Media Group is sending all these emails and anybody on Gmail is not opening them. So maybe we just shouldn't show it to people on Gmail anymore. So there is a direct correlation to cleaning up your database and actually having higher deliverability overall. Something that I feel like often gets overlooked, but is really important. So it's not just about saying I have 60,000, 50,000 people in my database. I'd rather have 5,000 people that I know are actually getting that content. And then here, again, recommended content, 3 to 4 emails in a sequence, pretty aggressive, so less than a week apart. So maybe we're sending an email, 3 days later, we're sending a second, 4 days later, we're sending a third. And these would all be one-to-one. We don't really need brand at this point. These are going to be from either their current sales rep or some contact at the organization. So there's a personal component to it, maybe some familiarity with the name. But again, this campaign is all about just getting people to show some level of engagement for sales to follow up with. And I'll leave it on this stat before I pass it over to Ryan. So 70% of buyer's journey is complete before they even reach out to sales, right? Super important to know that before we actually have a direct interaction with anybody that's going to purchase our products or services, 70% of their journey is already completed. They've done their research, they've looked at competitors, they've looked on social, they've gone to our website, they've gotten emails from others in the industry that are doing the same thing we do. So 70% of that is done prior to them actually reaching out. So it's important to have some strategy in place to help actually continue to build those relationships so that we're in front of our prospects at the right time, ultimately when they're ready to buy. Before I pass it over, Jake, any questions that we have in the chat, or anybody have any questions before we dive into more of a technical demo?
Nothing in the chat yet, Gil.
Okay.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to come off mute and ask.
Sounds great. Well, this is what Ryan in the second here is just going to really show the process of Pardot, which is Salesforce's marketing automation engine, and ultimately helping to generate leads through marketing automation, through email automation, and ultimately helping to nurture those leads. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Mr. Ryan Maddox for a demonstration of Pardot.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Gil. And I know this is a super important part of any sort of communication strategy, right? It's the strategy, it's the thought, it's the audience, but how do we put that strategy into practice? And it's obviously through technology. So I'll share my screen. Gil, I think yep, there we go. Share my screen and we can dive right in. So quickly here, really what we'll see here in the next 20, 30-ish minutes here is Pardot. And really Pardot is what I like to describe as that native communication engine of Salesforce. So just a quick path of where we're going. We'll start in the world of web. Here for the next few minutes, we'll spend the majority of our time in that world of email and those campaigns, as Gil was kind of mentioning, and then we'll tie it back into the sales enablement, tracking and the analytics of it all, right? So just a brief roadmap of where we're going here in the next few minutes. So, and for today's demonstration, I have Cumulus is kind of my financial services brand, my demo brand for today's walkthrough. So as I mentioned, we're going to start on the web. This is obviously what we're looking at is, your invited webinar is a sort of landing page website, right? So I like to talk through this. Most of my customers, I'd say 99% of my customers that I work with have that website, are investing in the channel of web, right? So how can Salesforce, how can Pardot help get a little bit more out of what you're already investing in? And really the two main areas where I focus my time with my customers is, first and foremost, it's the website tracking component of it. So who's coming to the website or this landing page, for how long are they spending? Maybe if we have different tabs and resources and pieces of content on the website, where are they specifically spending that time? We can go a little bit further than just, more or less that Google Analytics, in that we can actually see, hey, Bob is on our website. He's looking at this page for how long? So more to come here, but we're really tying it back to those records that we have already in Salesforce. So then we're empowering sales of, hey, we need to reach out to Bob at this time because he just looked at XYZ on our website. So having that, rich engagement data just feed directly back into Salesforce, have tasks automatically created based on that activity. So that's the first main component of the web and how we can integrate and complement, from that perspective. The other typical one is what we're looking at here. This is actually a landing page built, via Pardot, a very simple, you're invited. We have some details here. Here's my form that we can fill out. Ultimately, you can build and host alongside your website, or we can integrate with those existing landing pages and forms so that when I do fill out this, this form, that data can be sent automatically, assigned to the right person back into the world of Salesforce from a sales perspective. So that was a lot, just briefly on the web. We'll talk a little bit more about both of those, buckets here in a moment, specifically when we see, hey, what does it look like from a sales perspective when our prospects, when our clients are filling out or engaging, with the website. Moving right along, I'll do a quick, landscape of what we're looking at here. So again, Pardot, just that communication engine of Salesforce, should look very familiar from a UI perspective because we are in Salesforce as a platform. So I have my home screen. I can obviously customize it. I have my first, multi-touch campaign attribution report that I'm curious in. I have my recent records, maybe some pipeline metrics. You obviously can customize that home screen to have different reports, to do things, tasks that we want to complete. Well, how I like to talk through, setting the stage here is, I have my tabs and I've customized them, as such, where I have my Pardot or my communication tabs mostly here at the top. But then I have more of those default Salesforce objects like contacts, leads, accounts. I have my opportunities somewhere around here, reports, right? So again, one of the biggest values is, hey, we have all of this rich data in Salesforce. How can we have something native where we can bring those data points to better personalize, trigger those communications to those audiences in a very streamlined, efficient, personalized way? So outside of the landscape, we'll transition here for the next few minutes in the world of email. And I break down email into really 3 simple steps in any great email campaign that Gil kind of elaborated on, in the strategy section of this webinar. And that first step, right, we're going to create that audience. And Gil mentioned there's 2 really types of lists where we can create those audience. The first being that static list, perfectly fine. Static, it's not going to change. A lot of my customers use that, especially to get started. But what we're looking at here takes it to the next level, and that a dynamic list essentially is that living, breathing list where we're going to use that great data that we have in Salesforce as rules or filters to say, hey, if these contacts, if these leads meet these rules or filters, have them automatically added to the list. Should their data not match up, right, automatically take them off. But because it's living, breathing, it's always listening in the background. So as new contacts, as new leads are entered in or fill out forms, they can automatically update this list management process for the team. So a few basic examples that I had queued up here is, maybe we have different services, offerings, interests, right? So we're digesting what are they interested in. So maybe depending on their interests, we're going to tee up different content that is very personalized to what they give us as far as their ideal, interest in content, things that they're interested about. The second, maybe it's as simple as client type. Are they more prospective? Are they a current client? Are they a partner that we work with in the process to onboard new clients, right? Depending on that type of content or client, we might be sending, entirely different types of content pieces. And then lastly, we touched on this, we'll continue to touch on this more as we go through, but maybe it's a score. So how engaged are they in the content we've been sending? So that makes us think that they might be sales ready versus, more marketing qualified. So we can, filter by score, engagement, things of that nature. Really, the rule of thumb is if the data is inside of Salesforce from a field perspective, right, the contacts, the leads, the accounts, the opportunities, we can bring in those data fields directly into segmentation, which will tee up those personalized campaigns moving forward. So moving forward, right, audience step 1, it's really the foundation for our campaigns we're going to tee up. The second one, probably guess, is the content. And again, Gil elaborated on this, but this is just how we create it. So outside of Pardot, there's over 40 templates you can pick and choose from that are out of the box. You obviously can create your own templates. Obviously, this one we're looking at here is more that nice looking HTML email. Maybe it's an about us. We have a link. Maybe there's an upcoming webinar or event that we might be hosting in the future. So we'll use this content editor to make those changes, those updates as we see fit, just right here to the side. So whether we're changing images or coming in here and say, actually, I don't want this, look at this new deal text to be in there, we delete it. It has, what you see is what you get from an update perspective. Now we can also use these templates for more of those text-based templates, right? So those more personalized one-to-one, it looks like it's coming right from me, right from Gil. That's where we can create those emails as well. You can see, from a dynamic content perspective, right? We can use that data we have in Salesforce. We can, merge fields. So making it appear, at scale coming from, or, addressing the recipient, but also maybe the signature at the bottom if we're sending on behalf of a few different folks. We have A/B testing, again, dynamic content. So more, best practices standard from an email perspective to see what's working, what's not, really personalizing the content. Speaking about best practices, right? We're building, we're testing, we're sending all in one window. So making it very intuitive, very straightforward. So let's just assume, let's flip forward to the sending tab. Hey, everything, looks fine. This is just where we can quickly send these emails, right? So we're choosing what list we created in step one. Hey, are we suppressing anyone in those lists for whatever reason? We then can define who do we want these emails to look and feel like they're coming from. So we have a few different options, right? We're sending on behalf of Amy. Maybe she's the one that has the relationship with these clients. We can have more of a general user. So maybe it's coming from firms or the agency, the organization as a whole. Or we can map it back to Salesforce logic, right? So assigned users, account owners, maybe something wildly custom we have, set up down the road. Now, on the flip side, those responses, hey, we're getting responses from these folks because they are very personalized. It's resonating with them. Where those responses automatically going to go back to? We really can map back to those same, options as we do on the sender perspective. Now we've addressed the audience. So step one, the who, right? The content we've kind of start to build out. Really the third, as you can kind of guess already, how do we send, these pieces out? Truth be told, there's two main ways. The first way is through, what we're looking at here. We can schedule these emails to say go out tomorrow. We can send right away from this green button. Again, very intuitive, very straightforward. But the next way, the other ways, is sometimes the more exciting way. And I'll bring up an example. So Engagement Studio is really where we can create and really take these building blocks we just looked at and creating these campaigns and automations, different use cases. Really, it's an open canvas to create those different journeys. So in this case, it's, hey, we have our audience first from step one. We have our first email we created in step two. We're sending those out automatically, but then we're going to have this decision split, this trigger. Specifically, hey, there was a link inside of this email that we sent that was really compelling. And maybe this is that warm up. We're nurturing these colder leads in re-engaging them. So they click on this link. Let's say yes. In this case, maybe we trigger off a Salesforce task to be created, assigned to the appropriate person that says, hey, hot lead, call now. They just clicked on this specific link, right? So that speed to lead, that connection from traditional marketing to sales, it's now completely fluid, talking back and forth. We'll bring up what that looks like from a sales perspective here in a moment of tracking engagement and some of those alerts. Maybe it's hey, after we trigger a task, maybe we want this contact or this lead to be added to a call down list or a contact list, right? So automatically can put into a list. So maybe for the calls tomorrow, we call everyone that took down this path and went down, this channel. Now on the flip side, hey, they didn't engage with this link, but we're still wanting to nurture. Maybe this time we send them down this path. We send an email maybe 9 days later, but this time maybe it is a nice little HTML email versus this first one, which was more that one-to-one personal outreach type of email that Gil discussed previously. So again, I think this is a really good example to set the foundation. This is just one simple use case, right? This could be, hey, driving attendance for webinars or those educational sessions from start to finish. We could have, campaigns from, built out here. This is more of this, re-engaging cold leads. This could be more service, more retention plays, right? So maybe it's that 90, 60, 30-day campaign that will be going out. Maybe it's a cross-sell, upsell, right? What I'm getting at, if the data is in Salesforce, the contacts are in Salesforce, we have a vision. This is where we can bring in those data points and really create these very personalized customer journeys in the mix here.
Hey, Ryan, we have a question in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Just asking about mainly the differences between sequences in Pardot and sequences in Outreach. The question is from Michael Diamante. My apologies if I didn't pronounce that correctly.
Yeah, no, good question. I mean, it's going to be very similar, right? Like, this is going to be something, from a journey perspective that we can set up in the background and let it work for us. And then when folks meet through, these different, paths or hit a certain point, right, we're going to engage sales. So very similar in kind of the logic. And then I think, Jake, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was outreach. That's more of like just a direct sales tool. So I have customers that use, Pardot from a holistic engagement engine perspective, and then they'll have some of those sales cadence tools along the side. So it's not always apples to apples. Sometimes it's, apples to oranges from a communication strategy.
And I'm raising my hand like I'm in school, but so just to add on to that too, and Ryan, that was spot on. I think the two things that I'd like to add, one is that outreach, any sales cadence tool like Outreach, SalesLoft, Reply.io, there are caps and limits on the email sends, right? Because they're one-to-one, they're technically one-to-one communication tools. So there are much smaller limits on how many emails you can send out on a daily basis. The other is that those tools typically look for like reply as the action, but when it comes to actually measuring other digital interaction, a marketing automation tool can measure that, whereas Outreach typically can't. So if we wanted to know if somebody went to the website, filled out a form and took other actions, Pardot can actually measure and listen for that within the workflows, whereas Outreach is more linear in terms of, the types of things they can listen for. So there's more enhanced features from a digital asset standpoint in a marketing automation tool. And again, you don't have the limits on sending with marketing automation versus a sales cadence tool.
Awesome. Thanks, Gil. And yeah, thanks so much for the question. Makes it more fun for us too.
Michael just
awesome.
has another question asking if Pardot is included with Salesforce or if it is an add-on, which obviously it is an add-on, Michael. That does come as it's a marketing product.
Yep. Yeah. So it'd be another license, from a Salesforce perspective. So not included in just a CRM license. It would be in its own license called Pardot. Yep. No, great question. Just looking at the clock, I'll keep going. Just a few more things I wanted to quickly cover, and then we can, kind of back into other questions as well. So a lot of the things we've looked at so far is a lot of the things that we're doing, we're sending, we're tracking, so on and so forth. But what does it look like in Salesforce, and what does it look like from an analytics perspective? So I'll bring up Bob. He is a contact in Salesforce. So I have my CRM, my hat, my sales hat back on. So we have his, attributes, his fields we've collected along the way. A few things I want to call out. This first, this tile of engagement history. So this is where, just again, directly in the CRM, Pardot is just natively, in the same platform. We can see he's recently filled out a form 3 hours ago, specifically this one. He registered for this webinar. He opened up this specific newsletter. This is where we can see those website visits, specifically the About Us page. This is where he's clicking on those links, right? So from a sales perspective, I'm not looking at different platforms or looking anywhere else, looking at the records in Salesforce to see what he might be engaged with. Something else, taking engagement to the next level, right? And Gil kind of talked about this as well, but quantifying that into a number in which we call a score. So the higher the score, it's higher engaged Bob is on the content we've sent or made available for him to engage with. So it's that he's super interested in us, versus a grade is, hey, how interested are we in Bob based on the data we've collected on him along the way, right? So both can be customized, weighted differently. Obviously, your ideal fit better than anyone. So using data that we've collected in Salesforce to help set that up. To then have, just metrics on, who should we be reaching out to? Who should we be calling? Who should we be prioritizing, since time is always limited, right? Furthermore, we have, this engagement history. So, kind of goes a little bit more in depth, a little bit dynamic. So a nice little report that could be right on the contact page as well. So filtering by activity from a date perspective, campaign, even asset type. So while we're looking at the contact level, we can actually look at analytics and engagement from a few different levels. So maybe it's, hey, Bob is connected to this account, or, Ohana Inc. Let's look at it from that lens. So I'm looking at it from an account or organization standpoint. We still have that engagement history tab, so we can see, hey, holistically, how are the contacts engaging? So we can see in this case, we have Bob, he's just interacted with a form. We have Paul Morris, one of his colleagues, he just interacted with a demo recording. So we can see these activity points just below. So then we can see as from an account-based, marketing or just, tracking perspective, this is where we can have that activity, again, just native in the CRM, show up and have that be, enabling for the team to reach out to the right accounts, right contacts. Believe it or not, we can keep zooming out, right? The contact, I view that as a very micro lens of tracking and enablement. Account, we can look at it from that perspective, but maybe it's as simple as, from a send to send perspective. So, hey, we had this monthly newsletter. How did it perform just overall, right? So a pretty typical KPI report from a communication standpoint. So we'd see it, hey, we sent to 926 folks. We can look at the opens, the clicks, actually who these folks are. Are there any opt-outs, right? So we can see what's working, what's not from a send-to-send perspective. The last thing I quickly wanted to cover was more of those macro level reports. And there's a few that I'll talk through. So maybe this is the holistic, engagement. Again, like marketing, the two different sides of it. It's, hey, the things that we're doing. So we're creating content, we're sending it out. But just as important is the tracking and the reporting and the feedback that we'll gain along the way of what's working, what's not. Where should we pivot along the way? Are we finding new segments that are engaging at a higher rate? Are these campaigns actually leading to revenue coming in the door, right? So having a clear understanding of what's working, what's not from a reporting aspect leads to, data-driven decisions moving forward, tweaking things, getting better along the way. So as a macro level, right, we can look at, hey, how's our engagement overall? Obviously, we're to tie back in today's theme, we're hitting a home run with this open rate in this demo data example. We have a 360% open rate. So let's not change what we're doing. We're doing just fine. But we can look at it from different levels, and this is all fairly dynamic. We can filter by different campaigns should we want to as well. Look at it from a template, a form, even a landing page. So how are they comparing? Are these the KPIs we're looking to hit from an engagement standpoint? But like, what if we want to look at it from, a campaign perspective, specifically a multi-touch? So the three main, kind of influence models, right? We have an even touch. So distributing, those different touch points along the way to conversion evenly. The first touch, so weighting, that first interaction as the most important, obviously the last touch being the most important in this example, or a Salesforce model, something that you can create along the way. But this is one of those, hey, what are these campaigns that are working well as it relates to ROI and revenue coming through the door? So it looks like event in this case is leading the charge. So maybe we, dig a little bit deeper. What's actually bringing revenue in? It looks like this annual customer conference. So maybe this is where, from a macro perspective, we can start to dig in and say, hey, from a conversion, these conferences are really working. This webinar is really working, so on and so forth. So what I'm getting at, and some of these reports, there's a lot that I could quickly show in this, in this webinar, but what I'm getting at is, using, Pardot, Salesforce, everything's under one umbrella. These dashboards can be out of the box, but then you can use all of those unique data sets, from a CRM perspective, a marketing perspective, and create your own dashboards to visualize, the pipeline, the effectiveness. Are we going the right way? Are we doing the right thing? So quickly, the last thing I'll show is kind of that pipeline dashboard. So again, like marketing, sales, all in one window. So we can see from visitors to close ones, that snapshot, right? So opportunity, revenue, campaign data, in one spot to have those gut checks of what's working, what's not. So again, a lot of things we could show here, and this is just tip of the iceberg. but hopefully this was helpful in starting with the strategy and how we think about successful campaigns, to this is kind of how we actually put that strategy in action using Pardot and Salesforce to create those, those touch points. So with that, I think we got 2 minutes, so just enough to quickly go through maybe some brief questions and some closing thoughts. So I will pause to get a drink of water. And yeah, Jake, any questions in the chat?
Yeah, we got a few come through in the chat.
I can take those, Jake. The campaign monitor one I can take quickly. So Pardot actually, and we have clients that have used campaign monitor. Pardot's more accurate in general because it actually filters out false activity. So a lot of email providers are reporting email bots or email programs that are opening and clicking to check for spam. Pardot actually filters that activity out. So I tend to find that Pardot's open rate and click-through rates are much more accurate and very true to what's actually happening over other platforms, specifically campaign monitor in this case. And question right before that around generating new leads, that kind of goes back to the inbound marketing strategy. You need some type of strategy that would then feed Pardot that data. So Google AdWords, paid social, organic social campaigns, gated content in your website, traditional advertising methods. Those are things that would create new leads, and then Pardot would actually nurture those relationships once they're in the system. And then the only other one really quickly, Snappy Kraken. So Pardot doesn't have pre-built content. So that is something that our clients typically would build during, implementation, coming up with something custom. And the main reason is because it is something that's very personal and custom. So we tend to see more success with those like campaigns that are very specific to your business and your audience. But there are not, there are layout templates for visual, but there's not any content or pre-built campaigns ready to go. We still have a minute left.
I think so. And then we just got 2 more questions. One was referring to your demo from Kathleen McDermott regarding whether or not your view, Ryan, was very customized or was it out of the box?
On the contact, when you showed us your contact view.
Contact view.
Yeah, out to you for that matter.
Yeah, no, thanks. Helpful for the context there. A bit. Gil, you would probably know more just like out of the box. Like I know I have mine kind of, enabled a few different, levels and visuals, but from an out of the box to like what I showed Gil, did you have any like, thoughts there?
It's pretty close. I mean, I think, moving some things around but most of what was shown is fairly out of the box, maybe just more, different placement. But there was nothing like custom developed or custom built specifically in Ryan's org. It's mostly what our clients would see when they turn Pardot on after everything's implemented.
Is that for all versions of Pardot, or is that just at a certain level?
The only thing Ryan showed that was in the reporting would be with Plus, but everything else was with Growth, which would be this. Everything else would fall into the standard version, except for some of those dashboards. Yep. And then support and implementation. You can reach out to me, Kimberly, but you can also talk to Ryan.
Awesome. I think that does it for questions. Yeah, closing thoughts. If there are more questions, whether it's like Pardot or implementation, feel free to reach out to myself. You should have my email from the invite that we sent out for this session. Gil is an awesome partner from an implementation and is super helpful. So you can reach out to him directly as well, or just your overall account executive here at Salesforce. We'll get the right people connected to you as well. Yeah, Christy, would you close us out here? I know we're a minute over, but that would be fantastic. And thanks for everyone joining and the engagement.
Yeah, no, thanks everybody for joining. We really appreciate the time today. And thanks Ryan and Gil for walking through the presentation. But again, I would just reiterate what Ryan was saying. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to your account executive and we can loop everybody else in. So thanks again and have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
You.